Hit this motherfucker, G.
No, man, I can't fuck with it right now.
Oh, man, I've been dealing with you for 3 motherfucking months. You ain't hit the pipe in front of me yet.
So what you saying, man?
I thank you, 5-0.
5-0. Man, I ain't no motherfucking cop.
Well, hit this motherfucker then.
I can feel it.
Buy this car to drive to work to pay for this car. Buy this car to drive to work.
Welcome to YellBRo. I am Jordan. My mic's fucked up. And today, I'm doing a fan request video. That's right. Is consciousness not simply a computation? Hameroff. But first, please remember to share, support, hopefully donate to Devon's Journey to Recovery and Unapologetic's GoFundMe. Both links in the description box. Do that shit. Because why not? Fucking share that shit everywhere. Can't even donate. Fuck it. Do it anyways. I swear I'll stop one day. One day I'll stop doing it. Or maybe find something else to fucking pour myself out for. But for now, do that shit. Devon's Journey to Recovery and Unapologetic's GoFundMe. Both links in the description box. Alright. So here we have a requested video for my reaction of Dr. Stuart Hameroff. Consciousness is more than computation! Exclamation point. And it's a pretty long video, but I picked out the part that I was most interested in, and that's what we're rolling with. All right, and then I'll add some words in as we're watching it. All right, here we go. Here is Stuart Hameroff with Singularity Weblog, if that's this guy's channel name.
Of course, let me give you another chance. You know, me and you met for the first time at the Global Future 2045 conference a couple of weeks ago in New York City. And two of the most prominent critics there were Ray Kurzweil and Randall Kuna. So Ray Kurzweil from the state.
I've heard of Ray Kurzweil and heard nothing positive about him. It's just my experience. Unless your name's Joe Rogan, then you're plenty of positive stuff because he secretly wants to be a robot. Look at this guy as like a transhumanist type of mentality. So here we go. Now, Ray Kurzweil.
Conference a couple of weeks ago in New York City. And two of the most prominent critics there were Ray Kurzweil and Randall Kuna. So Ray Kurzweil from the stage, his criticism went something like that. And let me see if I can quote as close from memory as I can. Quantum mechanics is this kind of very mysterious phenomenon, Ray said. The consciousness is also this very mysterious thing that we don't know much about. And he said that therefore you claimed that therefore the nature of consciousness must be quantum mechanical in character. What?
That's very woo-woo of a science guy. I thought he'd do like a test or something and try to figure it out. But instead he's just like, well, one thing's a mystery and the other thing's a mystery. So this guy must have joined those together. They must be the same mystery. At least the same, origin place. That makes him silly. Come on, guys. Use your logic. Granted, that can happen, but something tells me instead of Kurzweil really looking into it, something tells me that he wants this guy to be incorrect. He wants Hameroff to be incorrect. Pause on the name, by the way. Hameroff. Come on. Here we go.
What do you want to say about that?
You know, Dave Chalmers called that, jokingly, the law of minimization of mysteries. If you have two mysteries, they might be the same mystery. Kind of joking.
I'm going to speed it up. Forgot to do that. Oh, if it sucks, then I'll just put it back. But here we go. We're doing it live.
They are related, though. It's clear that they're related in the observer effect. Now, how do you explain quantum superposition? I mean, is Ray saying that quantum mechanics doesn't exist? Quantum mechanics is the most successful theory ever put forth. It predicts things out to 25 decimal points in calculations. We know that superposition, that quantum computing, that entanglement all exist. Yes, they're mysterious. Roger has some ideas about that. So just because it's a mystery doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It certainly exists. Now, we know from the days of Niels Bohr, von Neumann, and Wigner, and Henry Stapp more recently, they think that consciousness causes collapse of the wave function. We turn it around. We say that the collapse is consciousness. But whichever view you take, it's clear that consciousness and quantum mechanics are related. And they could be the same mystery. Why not? I mean, they could be related, certainly. They each have their other components or other aspects, but they're clearly related. The question is how.
Let me ask you this.
Now, in my ears, that's a bunch of science stuff that I don't understand because I didn't study it. As far as quantum mechanics and fucking superpositioning and the collapse of this caused consciousness, I don't know. I mean, I look at it this way. It always seems like the artist figures it out, but they don't have the equation, and then the artist waits for science to catch up to them. Like, how do you know this? I am who I am. What? How do you explain that? I just am. Explain it, though. I am because I am. No. You need to test this theory out. You need to calculate this. You need machines to fucking observe this whatever. You need controls. You need fucking tests. You need all that shit. Otherwise, I can't just believe you, which is cool too. That makes sense. But it always just seems like that. Like the artist figures it out and then science catches up one day. But it's weird. The artist part isn't the thing that on the surface gets accepted. It never seems that way. It influences 100%. You'll see people moving in a different way because of the, I guess you can call it right brain type of thinking, the artsy fartsy shit. You can see it changing cultures and all that stuff, right? But it's not like brought up in conversation ever. Not really. Not the merits of the art itself. This stuff is, right? Look at the whole fucking vaccine thing, right? So I think that's the way society has been moving towards. To this hyper-masculine version of how to read what's happening in their own lives. Right? Stats, numbers, formulas, equations, tests, machines, on and so forth. The artist just simply saying it, or the philosopher. I'm using the word art, but you can say philosopher, dreamer, floater, whatever fucking word you want to put on it. Yeah. That type of thing is always seemingly being more and more pushed to the side for a more material argument. So I guess maybe that's evolution or the process or the cycle or... Oh wait, that's woo-woo again. Never mind, let's get back to this video.
They each have their other components or other aspects, but they're clearly related. The question is how.
Let me ask you this then. Randall Kuhn's criticism was perhaps a little bit more specific, and his proposal was that you have to have, perhaps the best way to do it is to have a very specific test or experiment where something specific will happen that cannot be accounted for without quantum mechanics. And he says unless you do that, you cannot prove that the quantum mechanics is relevant at all. And he's obviously one of the skeptics here.
Right. Well, first, I'll answer that in a second. First, let me say, what is the testable prediction coming out of AI and singularity? How are they going to prove their
whataboutism?
And I've been asking this question for 20 years. I haven't heard an answer. The other...
Now, I've been asking that question too. Well, not for 20 years, but I've been asking that question. I use a different lens. Like, he's going to use more of a... no, he kind of uses logic there too. Should I let him explain it? But it's essentially like, just because... he's going to bring it up. He's going to say, like, just because a robot, whatever, has more capabilities in regards to what we view as intelligence, that means it's like, it's getting closer to being conscious. It's like, doesn't make sense to me logically. Like, so when James reads a book, is he becoming more conscious? Like, is his consciousness expanding? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. But it seems like just one solid consciousness, and it's the different things you're applying to your own consciousness. Like, these things are already there. We're just more aware that we're more aware. If that makes sense. We're more aware that we're more aware. That's what it seems like when someone's like studying something. But But yeah, for me, that doesn't make sense, especially in his field where you're trying to prove it, right? You won't be able to tell whether it's just like, oh, maybe robots got so smart that it can mimic consciousness very much, like very good, as opposed to actually being a conscious being. But then that's going to throw questions back at Stuart here. It's like, like what dictates something being conscious versus not conscious, right? Because like what would make the separation between the robot and the person at that point? Maybe it's something like, oh, choice? Maybe that's one of the prime observations. Like, oh, it has agency. That's why. But then again, Stewart's theory is talking about, what does he call them? I can't even know. I don't even remember the word. Microbials? I don't know fucking know. Some shit in the brain, he says, between the ears and the eyes or something. And he says, oh, that's where, on a quantum level, this thing happens and it breaks down and consciousness comes out, which is basically saying consciousness emerges from the brain, right? And it's like, if it emerges from the brain, then there's a thing called choice is still in question here, logically speaking, on a philosophical woo-woo level. But you know what? Let's let him keep talking. I'm rambling about shit that, as far as the science part, that I don't know. Here we go.
I'll answer that in a second. First, let me say, what is the testable prediction coming out of AI and singularity? How are they going to prove their hypothesis? And I've been asking this question for 20 years. I haven't heard an answer.
Ray is giving examples such as the exponential growth of technology and a few benchmarks like Deep Blue defeating Kasparov in chess, perhaps
That's not consciousness.
Watson defeating Ken Jennings in Jeopardy. Not consciousness, but perhaps the steps, right? So we are short of.
So that's a child, like a philosopher would look at that and giggle. That's how childish that notion is. Look, this computer beat this guy in chess. We're getting closer to consciousness for robots. It's like, what? That's how childish that is in regards to like ideas like this. That's crazy. So you mean like adding extra tech to something makes it more conscious? Is my car more conscious because now it has GPS on it? It got smarter, see? It knows the map better than you do. It's like, yeah, but like someone programmed it to do that. No, it's smarter. It's smarter than you. And that makes it's going to be more conscious as time goes by. Like, fuck out of here. Soon cars will talk to us with its own consciousness that we can't prove. All right. Here we go.
That cannot be accounted for without quantum mechanics. And he says, unless you do that, you cannot prove that the quantum mechanics is relevant at all. And he's obviously one of the skeptics here.
Right. Well, first, I'll answer that in a second. First, let me say, what is the testable prediction coming out of AI and
Everyone
singularity?
did that far?
How are they going to prove their hypothesis? And I've been asking this question for 20 years. I haven't heard an answer.
Ray is giving examples such as the exponential growth of technology and a few benchmarks like Deep Blue defeating Kasparov in chess, perhaps
That's not consciousness.
Watson defeating Ken Jennings in Jeopardy. Not consciousness, but perhaps the steps, right? So we are short of consciousness.
It's that last step that's the killer, going from intelligence to consciousness.
But isn't that showing we're getting closer?
No, not to consciousness. We're getting more intelligent computers, to be sure. Closer to consciousness? No, it doesn't say that at all. So there's no testable predictions coming from their side.
Obvious on its face. That's
as far as Randall's
child's
question,
dream to
I would have
say
said, 5 years ago, microtubules must have quantum states.
Microtubules.
It's been proven. Honor has shown that. I would have said anesthesia must act through microtubules. Now we've shown that. Anesthetics act through microtubules, even though that hasn't gotten out to the general public. So how would we prove it definitively? I'm asking Honorbahn, excuse me, and I think this is going to be done in the fall, to test anesthesia on his quantum states and microtubules. And I think a group from Prague, Mikhail Cifra from Pokorny's group, is going to go and do these experiments. So what they're going to do is establish the quantum state in the microtubule at a certain resonance, bring anesthesia in, put it in a chamber, it's in air, and then you add anesthetic gas. The quantum coherence should go away. You blow off the gas, it should come back. Then you use a second gas that's twice as potent. The same thing should happen at half the concentration. A third gas, and you plot the effect on eliminating the quantum state in the microtubule with a known potency of the gas. If that works, I think that's pretty good evidence.
So I think what he's saying is that if you, because he's an anesthesiologist, right? So he I think what he's saying is that when you introduce these chemicals into where he believes the origin of consciousness is, there is proof that this is where the lights are going on and off at, right? Say this is where it's emerging from. And then from there, I believe that the quantum physics part is going to fuck my head up. So I'll try to let him explain that. But that thing I kind of understood. All right, here we go.
For it. And anyway, what we've done is far, far beyond any evidence coming from AI or singularity. They don't even address the issue of consciousness. They kind of treat it as trivial because they can't explain it, don't even want to deal with it.
I think
Little
that's
pussies.
because the majority opinion right now is that consciousness is an emergent
Bitch
phenomenon
asses.
as soon as you reach a certain level of complexity.
That is, but what's the level of complexity, and why isn't a tropical storm conscious, or why isn't a computer conscious? Why isn't the internet conscious? Some people will say, well, yeah, it is, but then how do you prove that? So, and proving it is a separate issue. So this consciousness emerges from complex computation is a hand-waving, fallback, desperate explanation. There's no evidence for it, and there's no real testable predictions. What's the level that it's going to emerge at? I still haven't heard an answer.
So let me ask you this then. You mentioned a
I
couple
agree.
of future tests that you plan to do in Prague, etc. Now, is that the best way to perhaps supply evidence or to prove in a way that your theory may be correct? Or do you have any other, do you have like a gold standard of any kind that you can say, if this were to be proven, I can honestly say I was right, me and Roger were right?
Well, you know, the ultimate gold standard is to reproduce consciousness or download consciousness. But the problem is, as you know, you can't prove consciousness. So we could have something that acts like it's conscious, but how would we know? The only way to...
You can prove consciousness to yourself. You just can't share it with the world. Here's a cup of Jordan. Drink up, pussy. Drink it like a Four Loko. Yeah. So yeah, you can prove it to yourself. You can prove your own existence to yourself. Just can't, you know. And part of me thinks it's always going to stay that way. That's my woo-woo idea of like spirit, the spirit of nature. That's like, no, you see, if we take this utility away, just have it in a test tube somewhere, like, oh, it's proven, here it is. It's like you're losing all this existential wealth. You know, like contemplating death. Like, why are you here? Who am I? Where am I going? Why am I here? What's that movie? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? I think it's a whale dropped from like outer space, and it it knows it's about to die and hit the ground. Like it's just born, like as a full-grown whale, and then also on its way to its death. But it's asking like what? Asking all these questions on its way to hitting the ground. It's like, why am I? Like, who am I? Where am I? Where am I going? And then splat. It's like, that's kind of what Jordan's talking about. Not a bad movie either. Silly movie. Most Def is in it. Alright. Now I must watch. Alright, let's keep playing.
Or do you have any other, do you have like a gold standard of any kind that you can say, if this were to be proven, I can honestly say I was right, me and Roger were right?
Well, you know, the ultimate gold standard is to reproduce consciousness or download consciousness. But the problem is, as you know, you can't prove consciousness. So we could have something that acts like it's conscious, but how would we know? The only way to do it would be to download your consciousness, come back and say, yeah, I was conscious when I was in that vat.
Even that's not good enough. Because they put you in a vat, they put your consciousness in a vat, and then bring it back, but they won't actually know if they're actually doing that or not. It could be so. That's the philosophy of science. It's just always gonna. That problem's always gonna be there. How do we know you didn't leave and then a demon possessed your body and now you're someone different? Someone else's consciousness now. Even that, like, right? You'd have to rely on witness testimony. Or you do it yourself, in which case you're just the witness testimony and you can't prove it to anybody else but yourself. Like, whoa, I was in this fucking vat for a second, then I came back. I'm like, holy shit. I just transferred bodies. How do we know that? Fuck. The brain scans, what if consciousness isn't in the brain somewhere? Listen, I have these degrees and it says I'm right. I'm joking. I'm not saying he doesn't sound like that type of guy at all. I'm just saying, like, even then, philosophically speaking, you're still shit out of luck with the same questions you went in with, as far as like why, like first of all, like why is consciousness important, right? That thing, those questions will still be there. You're still gonna be like, questioning your own existence and shit again. So it's like a different version of the same thing, different external content to deal with, but the same problems are there. But we'll hear some of his ideas about like what this could do for the world if they can prove it as correct.
Right.
Well, the ultimate gold standard is to reproduce consciousness or download consciousness. But the problem is, as you know, you can't prove consciousness. So we could have something that acts like it's conscious, but how would we know? The only way to do it would be to download your consciousness, come back and say, yeah, I was conscious when I was in that vat. That's a long way off. But that's the same problem that is faced by AI singularity types. So they tend to kind of ignore consciousness and get rid of it and use a bait and swap and wind up talking about intelligence like you just did, talking about Watson and Big Blue. That's intelligence, that's information, that's not consciousness. So I go back to what I said before. If anesthetics inhibit quantum states in microtubules proportional in relation to their potency and putting you or I to sleep, that's pretty good evidence. I'd say that's 99% of the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps it might be fair to call me one of those
to
AI
say that we are
types.
conscious.
So let me ask.
That's 99% of the way to say that we are conscious, or maybe where the consciousness sits in our brain. But it's still, the questions are still going to be there. Like, yeah, people will feel like, oh, yeah, we figured it out. And then give it some time, maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years, whatever. All of a sudden, religion will start peeking back in. But you didn't answer these questions, did you? Huh? There's room for God now. It'll just end up recycling. Huh? Yeah. Oh, they can't even hear you. But yeah. But yeah, that religion, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, like there's room for that still. Just what's gonna happen. Well, what happened was, God said this, and then our spirit jumped into this body, the right time, perfect timing, and that's why we're conscious, not because it emerged from the brain. But in order for there to be some sort of soul type of thing, it would have to be eternal, meaning it already existed. But I guess maybe consciousness would be like a different question in regards to a soul. Most people usually apply it to consciousness because they're egos. Let's be real about this. Their conditioned idea of what the world is. But all right, let's keep playing.
One of my best friends are AI singularity types.
Excellent, and I will be happy to be your friend. So let me ask you as a friend, the flip side of that coin. What would be the gold standard that would make you change your mind and say publicly, perhaps, me and Roger, we were totally off base here, we were wrong?
A demonstration of consciousness without microtubules or without quantum effects. Now that's a hard thing to do, and AI, which is why AI hasn't put forth any testable predictions, because they can't even imagine an experiment that would do that. So,
does anyone else feel like he's going at these motherfuckers? Anybody else hear that? He's like, yeah, that's why AI sucks. And but anyways, microtubules over here.
Hasn't put forth.
He's definitely got a little chip on his shoulder. It
they
looks
can't
like.
Even imagine an experiment that would do that. So it would be difficult. If the anesthetics have no effect on the quantum states in microtubules, I would seriously rethink our position, maybe even retract it. But it would depend on the experiment. We know anesthetics bind in microtubules.
That's the way
we know exactly where they
work.
bind in these what we call them quantum channels, leading to quantum dipoles and helical pathways in the microtubules that Travis Craddock and Jack Jasinski and I found, acting in the same area that seems to give rise to the quantum coherence that Anirban has discovered. So the picture is falling together nicely, and I'm very optimistic about it. But again, if the anesthetics have no effect on the quantum states in microtubules, that would be a big setback.
Stuart, let's assume for the sake of the argument you're absolutely wrong, absolutely right. I mean, absolutely correct in your theory. What's the bottom line, most important implications that you can think of?
Understanding consciousness would help us a lot in treating mental disease, neurological disorders. I'll give you one example.
I would have stopped him right there. Like, wait. You're telling me that if you figure out the origin of consciousness, that it's gonna okay, let's work on mental disease. Obviously, I'd say that too, but the first thing I'd be like, the whole fucking world changed. That's a world-changing thing. Now everything's different because you'll hear what he says later on. Big like, if his idea of consciousness is for real, that changes the whole game, the whole fucking game. Like forget about it. Suicide bombers might be like, what's the point? I think there's a point, but you know, it would kind of shatter that notion of like, I'm doing something crazy for death. Or suicide would be different. Suicide in general would be different. Murder might be different. All these things, man. In fact, for some people, it might even ramp up. Because they're like, fuck it. You're going to keep going on anyways, but I don't want you here, so boom. Who knows? But obviously, yes, mental disorders. Who are you? I still think the psychologists that can negotiate the woo and the science part, I think they would be better at this rather than, okay, then I think what he's going to say is something a lot more materialistic. And you just give them this medicine thing right here in the microtubules and they'll be happy again. Just saying. Like I said in the beginning of this video, it's like something tells me that the artists are going to figure it out, but they're not going to have the scientific equation for everyone. And then they're going to wait for science to catch up. So, science people, if this dude figured this shit out, let's say he did, as important and as crazy as that is, it's like, you still have to be like, sorry, your job's not done. You got to keep going. Or someone else got to pick up the slack or something. Like, there's still many, many things that need to be proven on the science end in order for me to accept the science answer. Hey, you know what I mean. This type of science. All right, here we go.
You're wrong. Absolutely right. I mean, absolutely correct in your theory. What's the bottom line, most important implications that you can think of?
Understanding consciousness would help us a lot in treating mental disease, neurological disorders. I'll give you one example. One of the resonant frequencies that Honorbound found is in megahertz, actually a whole bunch of resonant frequencies. Megahertz is ultrasound, which we use in medicine all the time. So I said, and ultrasound has been shown to have effects in the brain, in animals, electrophysiology and behavior. So I said, well, maybe ultrasound of the brain would affect consciousness in some way. So we tried it and we did a study, and ultrasound for 15 seconds at 8 megahertz to the brain causes an improvement in mood. You actually get a little bit happier 10 and 40 minutes after the exposure. We published that in Brain Stimulation. It just came out a couple months ago.
Now, do you see how that's not free will? Thus, it's not people's traditional notion of consciousness, right? Even though he says some, I guess, woo-woo sounding things, that's still dictated by your environment or whatever the fuck, right? If I can just play a sound wave in your fucking ear and you're happy, even though there's no context to the essence of who you are, right? Like that would be, if you're in the spiritual, I am me, I have a self, it's like that would be kind of like an antithesis to that, in a way. But, just saying.
15 seconds at 8 megahertz to the brain causes an improvement in mood. You actually get a little bit happier 10 and 40 minutes after the exposure.
The artist says define happiness.
We're doing a follow-up study at 2 megahertz for 30 seconds. Seem to be getting better results. We're also doing studies in a lab here at the University of Arizona with Uma Raman and Saurav Ghosh, who are looking at ultrasound effects on individual neurons as they start to grow axons and dendrites. And the preliminary evidence, and this is very early, seems to show that the ultrasound is promoting the early development, of neurons by, we think, vibrating the microtubules and making them more active. If that's true, then we intend to try it on brain damaged patients, traumatic brain injury, soldiers coming back, people who have been in car accidents, because it should help make new synapses, promote neuron growth, and reestablish connections. The same problem is in Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease is a disease of microtubules. Despite the amyloid plaques, it's actually the neurofibrillary tangles inside the neurons that cause the problems. So maybe ultrasound will help in Alzheimer's.
Now, maybe they could be mistaking feeling good. I'm sorry, my woo-woo perspective. I have my ideas of what's going on in regards to consciousness, but let's just say, like, look at it like maybe instead of whatever, an ultrasound or whatever frequency they fucking put on your fucking temple, it isn't really making you happy as much as it could be healing physical damage, which normally people be like, oh, I feel good. James has some fucked up thing on his leg right now. If that healed instantly, how would you feel about that? You'd feel better? Is that me? If I snap my finger and that happened, is that me giving you happiness? Like, oh, it's your reaction to something that you're experiencing. So, so that's what those are the philosophical questions I would ask to Stuart Hameroff. All right. All right, here we go. Now, he's going to say some woo-woo shit here, just so you know. I don't know if it's right here, but he's going to say it eventually.
So there are many medical applications, whether it's quantum or not, just addressing the microtubules. Now, excuse me, in the larger sense, in the philosophical sense, if the Orkawar proposal is correct, it means that consciousness is really happening at the level of space-time geometry, at the Planck scale, the lowest level of the universe, between the ears and the microtubules.
That we're aware of.
At the Planck scale, the lowest level of the universe, between the ears and the microtubules in the brain. Now, about 12 years ago, there were 2 studies in Europe on patients who had cardiac arrests and had so-called near-death and out-of-body experiences. They saw white light, a tunnel. In some cases, they floated out of their body. And they asked the people who did the study, well, how do you explain that? And they said, we don't know. Ask Penrose and Hameroff because they have this crazy theory. So Roger didn't want to get involved, but I said, well, maybe, and I've seen this happen. Okay, it happens. I said, well, under normal circumstances, it's happening in the space-time geometry in the brain, but when the coherence is lost, the blood stops flowing, the energy is lost, the quantum information isn't destroyed, but sort of dissipates or leaks out to the universe at large, but remains entangled as a kind of quantum soul, if you will. The patient is revived, and it goes back in. The patient said, hey, I was floating above my body. Or
think of, like, Donnie Darko. And you see, like, was it like this like weird ghostly thing looking like it's coming out of their chest, right? I guess that's what he means by entanglement. You're still, I guess, entangled to the body in a way. But once that separation happens, you become entangled in something else. Maybe that's where he's going. I don't fucking know. Sounds woo though. I like it.
Under normal circumstances, it's happening in the space-time geometry in the brain, but when the coherence is lost, the blood stops flowing, the energy is lost, the quantum information isn't destroyed, but sort of dissipates or leaks out to the universe at large, but remains entangled as a kind of quantum soul, if you will. The patient is revived, and it goes back in. The patient said, hey, I was floating above my body. Or if the patient dies, maybe it persists indefinitely in the universe at large, maybe even goes back into a new organism or creature in reincarnation. It makes these things possible. It makes afterlife.
No. Not possible. It would make them more observable for you in the context of the field you study. Right? We didn't make gravity possible. We observed it, studied it, and on and so forth. But, yeah, it's like, who's to say that the leaking out wasn't something leaking in the fucking beginning, right? Wouldn't it kind of give credence to that? Well, for him, he'd say no. He'd be like, well, the brain didn't exist yet, so that means that couldn't have happened. But once again, the woo-woo ideas, yeah. And as far as my idea, just throwing it out there, it is an emergent thing, but it's not emerging from the brain. I guess, and to use some of his words, like it would entangle itself with the brain, where it's almost like it's like 2 pieces of paper laying on top of each other, like they look like it's one thing, but really, if you just fucking rub the page, it'll separate into 2. but it becomes so entangled, and almost like the consciousness recognizes with the thing it's entangled with, to where it can't tell the difference. Thus, we are our bodies. But yeah, I've asked this. I actually asked Jamal Thomas this on a stream once in the chat. He was talking about consciousness or whatever. And he's like, and all the discussion seemed to be about the consciousness leaving. Like, what happens when you die? Oh, your ghost floats out of your body and goes somewhere, or whatever the fuck. I'm like, what if it goes internal, as far as perspective speaking? Instead of going out, it just goes back in, almost like it emerged, like something breathing, or like the Big Bang, where it's here, and the consciousness spreads throughout the body, and then retracts itself. I don't know. Some woo-woo shit that they're out there. Just to add to the discussion, so I'm not just sitting here just watching a video saying nothing. All right, here we go.
Well, the patient is revived and it goes back in. The patient said, hey, I was floating above my body. Or if the patient dies, maybe it persists indefinitely in the universe at large, maybe even goes back into a new organism or creature in reincarnation. It makes these things possible. It makes afterlife a plausible scientific possibility. Right now, scientists say, no, that's impossible. But those scientists can't explain consciousness in the brain. They can't say that consciousness out of the brain is impossible. So I think it would have implications for the possibility, the plausibility for afterlife and out-of-body experiences. It also can explain parapsychology and all kinds of weird phenomena that seem to happen that scientists won't even consider because they don't make any sense in their context. In the context of the brain as a classical computer. Brain as a quantum computer opens the door, a Pandora's box, to all kinds of weird things that might be true after all.
Now, yeah, this is where I'm going to stop the video. But, I mean, you would think that that question isn't answered. Like, think of how fucking important that question. Like, who are we? We're just in a normal sense. Like, who are we? What is death? What is life? What is all these fucking questions? You would think people would take that as the most important fucking thing ever. But instead, they just say, fuck it. There's still fucking guys out here that are fucking trying to figure out what the fuck the thing is. Like, what are you? Who or what are you? They're trying to figure it out. They haven't figured it out yet, but it's like, fuck it, I got taxes to pay. So, you would think that's the most fucking important question in human history, but it's not taken that way. Something tells me if this guy gets on a stand and says, Eureka! I figured it out. No one would give a flying fuck. It'd be him and a small group of scientists like, yeah, this is fucking crazy. Probably, not just them. Probably the government too. Like, what do we do with this? How do we bend this to our will now? And I guess people like me. So, but that's nowhere near the mass of the population. Their existence is being put on a fucking scientific table, and they don't give a flying fuck about that. That's so crazy. All right, a decently long video, 38 minutes. It's all interesting. It's all interesting to me. Now, once again, I truly believe this. I think the artists and the philosophers and the woo-woo motherfuckers will figure this shit out well before these guys do. And they'll be sure of it, too. A lot of people, they'll be sure of it. But at the same time, they won't have that evidence thing that they have to share with the rest of the world to convince them. They're already convinced. It's more about, well, how do we explain this to other people? To even get more woo-woo, are we even meant to do that? Who knows? I'm not going to do some self-fulfilling prophecy bullshit where it's like, we're not meant to know. How do you know? Well, I bombed their facility, so they can't do it anymore. We weren't meant to know, see? None of that bullshit. But, that's just an idea I look at as far as, like, I brought this up before in regards to, like, this idea of heaven. Like, if there was a heaven and there was a way to get there, people still wouldn't want you to tell them that. They wouldn't want you to sit there and just explain how to do it. Like, I want to figure it out myself. It's almost like they're the actual fucking key to heaven. It's not just something you just grab and then adopt and then do it. You have to become the key, I guess, in a way. I figured it out. It's mine. No, it is you. It is you. Whatever. Don't forget to subscribe if you like, comment, agree, disagree. I don't even know if there's anything to agree or disagree with. That was just random abstract shit all over the place. Tell me what you think about Stuart here. Stuart Hameroff. Don't forget to share, support, hopefully donate to Devon's Journey to Recovery and Unapologetic's GoFundMe. Both links in the description box. With all that said, give this video a thumbs down.
Say you wanna get in, and then you wanna get out. When you get the money to buy yourself a castle, how will you wear your leisure? You zip it back and